$14 billion, built from nothing, in an industry with no legal protection, no contracts, no courts, and no second chances. He appeared on the Forbes billionaires list 3 years in a row, not because Forbes celebrated what he did, but because the numbers were too big to ignore. Joaquin Guzman El Chapo grew up so poor his family couldn't afford shoes. He dropped out before finishing 3rd grade. By his 50s, he controlled the most powerful drug trafficking organization in human history. And then he lost everything. Not to a rival, not to a bullet, to a soap opera actress, a rolling camera, and his own desperate need to be seen. Stay until chapter 5, because the moment this empire began to die was not the arrest. It was years earlier, and it was entirely his own doing. This is the story of how the empire was built, how it worked, and exactly how it collapsed. The boy, the mountains, made the verdict. El Chapo's greatest competitive advantage wasn't violence. It was a childhood that taught him how power actually works. The Gap, La Tuna, Sinaloa, 1957. A village so remote, the Mexican government barely acknowledged its existence. No paved roads, no running water, no economy beyond subsistence, farming, and, quietly, poppy fields that had supplied opium to outside markets for generations. The journey. Joaquin Guzman was born into that world. His father was unreliable and violent. His mother raised 7 children, with no guarantees of food and no discussion of the future. What Sinaloa gave him was a specific education. The only law that applied was the law you enforced yourself. Loyalty was the most valuable currency, and the poppy fields surrounding his home were connected through a chain of hands he couldn't yet see to enormous wealth somewhere far away. He wanted to find that chain, and he wanted to own it. The scene, by his teenage years, he was already working for local traffickers, not as muscle, as a logistical problem solver. Even then, that was his gift. The boy who couldn't read a classroom textbook could read a supply chain better than anyone around him. The lesson. The most dangerous education is the one the system never intended to give you. The apprenticeship that built the blueprint. The verdict. El Chapo didn't invent the cartel. He identified every flaw in someone else's model and fixed them. The Gap. In the late 1970s, Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, El Padrino, ran the most powerful trafficking operation in Mexico. Sophisticated, politically connected, structured like a corporation. El Chapo went to work for him and spent nearly a decade absorbing everything. The journey. How to move product in volumes that overwhelmed inspection capacity. How to bribe officials at exactly the right level, not too low, not too high. How to build redundancy into supply chains so that losing one route never stopped the operation. He was not the most feared man in the organization. He was the most useful. When Felix Gallardo was arrested in 1989 and his empire fractured, Guzman didn't mourn. He treated it like a startup opportunity. He took the Sinaloa corridor, the Pacific Coast route, into the United States and began building something his mentor never achieved. Not a trafficking route, a system, scalable, resilient, and designed to survive the loss of any single piece. The lesson: study the best model available, then build the version without its flaws. The tunnels and the scale. The verdict. At its peak, the Sinaloa cartel controlled between 40 and 60% of all drug traffic entering the United States. El Chapo had a market share most Fortune 500 CEOs would consider impossible in a market where his competitors were also trying to kill him. The journey. While other cartel leaders focused on territory and violence, Guzman focused on infrastructure. He commissioned tunnels beneath the U.S.-Mexico border, some hundreds of meters long, equipped with ventilation systems, rail tracks, and electricity, not rough passages. Engineered corridors, built by actual construction professionals. 200 tons of cocaine per year, transported across one of the most surveilled borders on Earth, month after month, year after year. The scene. A kilogram of cocaine purchased in Colombia for roughly $1,500 sold wholesale in the United States for $25,000. Broken down to street level, over $100,000 in revenue. Multiply that across 200 tons per year. The cartel was, functionally, a multinational corporation with a cash flow problem no legitimate CFO had ever been asked to solve. Restaurants, car dealerships, and construction companies laundered the proceeds. The money went in dirty. It came out as revenue. The lesson: the violence was real, but the violence was never the point. The logistics were always the point. 2 arrests, 2 escapes. The verdict: El Chapo was captured twice. He escaped twice, and each escape was more humiliating for governments than the last. The journey: June 1993, arrested at Guatemala City Airport, extradited to Punta Grande, Mexico's most secure federal prison. Walked out in 2001. Inside a laundry cart, investigations revealed he had essentially taken over the prison from the inside, bribing guards, corrupting officials, turning the institution designed to contain him into another node of his operation. He didn't escape from prison. He managed it until leaving became a formality. El Chapo corrupted every institution built to stop him. Do you think that says more about him or more about those institutions? Drop your verdict in the comments. February 2014, captured again in a beachfront condo in Mazatlan, sent to Altiplano, Mexico's most secure prison. 17 months later, guards noticed he wasn't in his cell. A tunnel 1.5 kilometers long, equipped with lighting, ventilation, and a modified motorcycle on rails had been built from the outside in. Nobody inside the prison had reported hearing anything. The lesson: you cannot contain a network by capturing its leader. The network simply roots the vanity that cracked the empire. The verdict: the $14 billion empire was cracked open by ego. The gap: after his second escape, El Chapo was untouchable in the mountains of Sinaloa. And then he decided he wanted to make a movie about his own life. The journey: he reached out to Mexican actress Kate del Castillo, who had publicly expressed sympathy for him. She connected him to actor Sean Penn. In October 2015, Penn and del Castillo flew to a secret mountain location and conducted a 7-hour interview with the world's most wanted fugitive. El Chapo gave the interview because he wanted to control his own story. After decades of operating in total shadow, the man who had built an empire on invisibility decided he needed an audience. The scene: Mexican authorities tracked the communications used to arrange the meeting. They closed in on the location. El Chapo escaped barely, but the intelligence gathered led directly to his final capture 3 months later. A man who had outmaneuvered the DI, the Mexican Marines, and 2 maximum security prison systems, undone by the same need for recognition that destroys CEOs, politicians, and kings. The lesson: power is most dangerous when it starts believing its own legend. The verdict: January 2016. A gunfight in Las Machas, another tunnel, a carjacked vehicle, and a traffic stop on a highway at 5 in the morning where the most wanted man in the world was caught sitting in the back seat, reportedly exhausted. He was extradited to the United States on January 19, 2017, sentenced on July 17, 2019, life plus 30 years, $12.6 billion forfeited on paper. Nobody seriously believes the government found most of it. He sits today in a DX Florence, Colorado, 23 hours a day, in a cell with no windows and no contact with other inmates, for the first time in his life, in a place his money cannot reach. But here is what the story usually skips. The Sinaloa cartel did not collapse when El Chapo was arrested. His sons took over. The tunnels still run. The routes still operate. The money still moves, because he built something that was never dependent on any single person, including himself. El Chapo applied genuine operational genius to an industry built entirely on human suffering. Every gram that moved through his tunnels destroyed something on the other end. Families, neighborhoods, lives. The $14 billion came from somewhere. It came from someone. Many, many someones. The empire was real. The cost of building it was real too. And the cell in Colorado is the only honest conclusion to a story that was always going to end exactly this way. Next video: another empire built on moving something the world desperately wanted, but this time legally. A family that turned a single product into a global distribution machine worth hundreds of billions. Almost nobody outside the industry knows their name. Subscribe. It drops this week. See you in the next one.